How's it going, folks? I'm Matthew, this is Lemora's Cards, and today we're going to be taking a look at the European cEDH qualifier. This is a really big tournament that took place over this past weekend, which was pretty filled with big tournaments. I think there were 6 events, at least, that have already showed up on EDH Top 16 with over 64 players. Really big weekend for cEDH. And today we're looking at the biggest of them all. So we're going to be looking at the top 16 of this event. We'll be taking a look at the meta breakdown. It's been a little bit since I did a tournament report, but this one popped up, looked pretty interesting, and again was a pretty huge event, so pretty excited to see what we got going on here. Thank you as always to my amazing patrons over on Patreon. Their support helps me make more regular videos, do extra perks for them, usually upload early over there. You can check out the videos early there, as well as get other perks like coaching, private deck videos, things like that. And with all that being said, let's go ahead and hop into it. Use the link in the description below to download Whatnot, and you'll get $15 to use to buy Magic singles, sealed product, get anything that you want really. There's no limits. You just get $15 on the account for free just for signing up. This is one of the best ways you can support the channel, and again, it's just free stuff. Use the link in the description below, give Whatnot a try. This video is brought to you by Beholder Gaming, who is throwing a cEDH 10K July 27th and 28th at Charlie's Collectible Show in Stone Mountain, Georgia. This event is fully proxy friendly, will be one of your last chances to earn points for the Top Deck Invitational, as well as the first platinum event in the Beholder Gaming Southeastern Circuit, an invitational circuit for players down here in the Southeast. I'll be attending this event, and I can't wait to see you there. It's going to be great. Find out more in the description below. First, we're going to take a look at the meta breakdown. This is a 104 player event, so pretty huge tournament. And there's not too many huge surprises in the breakdown, at least. Tymna Kraum, most popular deck there with 10 entries. Still not a massive representation, but pretty popular. 30% conversion rate. Sisay blowing through with a 42% conversion rate of only 7 entries with 3 top 16s. Kennen continuing kind of a really big downward trend. Rogside doing well. Decks like Tivit, Najeela, Talion showing up. Korvold popping up. A little bit of a spoiler, but this was a good weekend for Korvold. I think we had like 4 Korvold top 16 this past weekend, and then you have a bunch of one-offs and, you know, like pretty decent amount of different commanders showing up with 48 different commanders, roughly like half of all players playing a different deck. So pretty cool representation. All right, now we're going to take a look at the top 16 decks. We're going to do this the way I've kind of been doing it. Seems like you guys prefer that, where I kind of skim through if there's nothing too wild standing out, especially with a more established deck. Talk about the things that make the list stand out, all that good stuff. So Sisay, a deck that's continually popping off. Here we see a slight difference on the Planeswalker choice. Oko is like one of the more flexible options that you'll see. Sometimes you see the Hada show up, Ashiok. The other ones of these usually pretty popular. Creature package. Pretty heavy on the dorks, kind of be expected. So we do have a Kennen, Lavinia, Lothos showing up, Derevi. A new option here out of Thunder Junction, Honest Rutstein, which is 1 black-green. Enters the battlefield, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand, and creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Pretty much a legendary Eternal Witness type of effect that also makes your creatures cheaper, and you have 24 of them. Could come in handy. Wasn't one on my radar, but again, having a legend to tutor up this mana value, usually at that point you kind of want, it's kind of in competition with Tyvar, I guess, in terms of that cost and what you can get and wanting those colors. But there's gonna be times where this is pretty nice, and again, gives you flexibility having that way to, with a legendary, just go and buy back any creature in your graveyard. That's pretty cool. Talion doesn't always show up. It's a nice value engine that you can get out with Sisay. Most of the rest of these pretty standard. Fairy Mastermind shows up in a couple of decks. Flesh Duplicate pretty much replaced Vimage in these kind of decks if they were running it, just because it does combo with the meal if you copy a Dockside, so that's pretty nice. Sorceries, DT, Neoform, Eldritch Revolution. They run like from 1 to 4, usually including these, and potentially Finale of Devastation. Interaction. This is where Sisay decks can be a little bit different than your higher color piles, because sometimes they go lighter on the actual interaction. But it looks like this one not going too light on it. For counterspells, we've got Pact, Offer, Fluster, Misstep, Red Blast, Swan Song, Swat Fierce, 2 Forces, and Mindbreak Trap. So not skimping on the stack interaction at all. Artifacts, nothing too shocking here. Enchantments, and this is pretty standard too. We usually see the Touch, again, can handle the Oppo, can flicker your Dockside, which can be huge. Flowering of the White Tree isn't that common. It is tutorable by Sisay. It being 1 color is a little bit worse for your 2-drops, you know, if you're trying to get your Sisay count high, but it can be nice to just get that bump because it also gives Sisay, you know, +2 power, top of the Ward 1, which can be nice. Really bumping all of your legends kind of gives you a little bit more of a nice little beatdown plan, at least pressure the Oz players, but the Ward 1 being a pretty pivotal part of it. And then Tithe, Oath, they are on these cards. And then the 27 lands. Next up, we have Kenrith, King of Thousand Faces. Got the Fairy Time Raveler here. We're probably going to see Kitten. We got the Skirk Prospector. That, along with your like Fimage lines, help you do Dockside reanimation loops pretty easily with Kenrith, which is a pretty major part of the deck's identity and what it's able to do. A couple cards we don't always see. Delny is usually more likely to show up in a deck that's commander, triggers off of it, like Tymna. But here, it can make your Cannons better, your Docksides better, stuff like that, Ragavans, Bowmasters. So, I mean, it's still definitely a powerful card. If you're a more mid-rangey creature combo-y deck, it can be a nice option. Being able to like force your Dockside combo to work by getting either a Delny or a Kinnan or whatever can be pretty nice. Kitesail Larcenist, really good into those kind of grindy pods, can take out 3 things all at once, can be pretty huge. Luris kind of shows up in these kind of decks. You are already doing kind of graveyardy combo-y stuff, right? Mayhem Devil for combos. We do have the Kitten there. Colossal Sky Turtle is a card I expect to see just in creature heavy non-Nas decks. This card just kind of tends to show up and just be pretty flexible. Talion as a value engine showing up here again. And then Sidici's Faithful usually is just like a Dockside bouncer, Dockside doubler for a mana. Obviously, other things you could do, it can be a pretty flexible card. Can also help you by getting your Dockside into the yard to start the loop if you need to, or whatever. There's a lot of different flexible stuff you can do with that. Sorcery. So we're on the Reanimate. I guess Reanimate does have more targets, right? You can't put like a Meal and Reanimated, or probably not a Turtle, but I mean, you have some 4-drops that Unearth doesn't hit. I guess we're not a Nas deck more than likely, so Unearth isn't much better than Reanimate, and Reanimate can also hit big things like your opponent's Might Mill, like if somebody wheels you and can't discard the Consphinx, being able to Reanimate is pretty nice. Beseech the Mirror is probably the most surprising because of this being a 5-color deck and it having black as a cost. It's not like Necropotence where it says like pretty much win the game. Obviously going to be good in a deck with a lot of different A+Bs, right? You can Beseech and get a Meal. You can Beseech and get your Dockside. You can Beseech and get your Breach. But, that is a pretty steep cost at triple black. We'll see if we're on like Cabal Ritual maybe to help iron that out. No Cabal Ret, but we do have the Entomb. Makes sense. Kenrith can reanimate. Not at the best rate in the world. It's 5 mana, but not the worst. So in terms of interaction, we do have the Pact and the Offer showing up. We do have the Born and the Final Fortune. I'm wondering if we're going to be on Necro. Seeing that we had a Beseech the Mirror here, but no Cabal Ritual makes that a little bit less likely, I feel like. I don't know, maybe. But yeah, obviously no Nas. We're on an Intuition. Of course, we're doing Breach stuff. There's Brain Freeze. Artifacts, nothing too shocking here. We are on the One Ring. Makes sense. Our commander's not really much of a draw engine. You can see that we're not on like Fierce and SWAT. We're not on Jeweled Lotus. There's no hurry to get Kenrith out. It's purely an outlet. They're not trying to do the like Training Grounds silliness of actually trying to turn this 5 mana thing that has to spend another 4 mana to draw a card into a value engine. Survival of the Fittest makes a ton of sense in these kind of Kenrith, Reanimator, combo, creature decks. Of course, we're on the Breach, Tithe, no Necropotence. So, I mean, Born is just good anyways. Final Fortune is just good anyways. Just seeing the Beseech is a lot. We're on the Animate Dead. Nothing too shocking here in the enchantments. And then the mana base, nothing too surprising there. 5-color mana base. So they thought about Yogg's Will, Wheel, and Chthonian Nightmare. Chthonian Nightmare will slot into these Kenrith decks. That's going to be one to watch out for post MH3. Gonna change the format. It's gonna be really exciting to see. But yeah. But next up we have Korvold, Fakehurst King. I talked about Eric's list a good bit, but this already looks pretty different from his, so that's gonna be interesting. So the Dork package, it's a little surprising. They're pretty high on them. So they're on like Mystic and Llanowar Elves. A lot of lists might go like Elves of Deep Shadow even before going these ones, but we're on it here. Haywire Might showing up can be good at getting rid of things like Ristic, Mystic, the One Ring, etc. Orcish Lumberjack, kind of the most impactful dork you can have a lot of times, up there with Ragavan, both situational, powerful dorks. Dothy showing up, definitely looking more mid-rangey already. We got Dothy, the Vexing Shusher, which can just be like pretty good if you're making the mana to support it. But Impercruiter, lots of creatures, lots of like kind of more creature-y combo, like Gruul looking stuff than necessarily like a Turbo Rakdos Breach deck slashing green. Temur Sabertooth, of course, can win with Dockside if the count's high enough. Cards that may not look unreasonable for Korvold, but aren't like this isn't really the way that Korvold is that often built currently. Witherbloom Apprentice is also showing up. One of the most all-in combos that you can have in this format. Sorceries, it's a good bit more normal here. We have the Chain of Smog for our combo. We have Twin Flame, which can just be a good card, but also to combo with our Dualcaster Mage. Jessica's Will is maybe a little bit more surprising to see in a deck that looks like maybe a little bit more slow and steady, and it might not power out Korvold that well, but also a strength of these kind of decks that are more on like more dork heavy and stuff like that is Korvold's kind of better when you have a lot of material lying around when you do have it come out. So if you are doing like the land, Mox, Talisman, Dork or something, like a decent amount of mana, and you turn to maybe play a land and a Dork or something, when you do get around to casting Korvold, he isn't as intensive on your mana resources as if you go like land, Jeweled Lotus, Dark Ritual, Korvold or, something similar to that, where Korvold is just like, okay, let me come in and eat your one land. You don't really want to power Korvold out that way. So that can be a strength of these decks. You have like an Imp Recruiter flying around, just munch that up. Instance, we got the Veil. We are on the Consultation and the Tainted Pact. Both just playable cards, but also like, interestingly, actually we're not on Praetor's Grasp. So we don't really have that backdoor of my combo's not here. And also no Ruthless Technomancer, which I basically think is incorrect. I don't want to downplay this deck, but we have a lot of win cons here jammed in. We've got Wither Chain, we've got potentially Mayhem Devil, which can be a value slot, but is also often there to just win the game at the end. Squeef, so Food Chain, and Temur Sabertooth. So lots of combos that don't even necessarily overlap. Hey, we talked about overlapping in our last deck building episode over on the podcast. Go check that out. Ruthless Technomancer is just so busted. I would really like to see that here over one of these other slots or maybe one of these other win cons that can be a little clunkier. Like Dualcaster Mage is pretty clunky at this point, loses to everything. You can even keep in Twin Flame just as a card if you like it, but maybe cut the Dualcaster for Ruthless Technomancer because the line it opens up to you without even changing anything. Like you might want to add Skirk Prospector, but even just Mayhem Devil Dockside, Ruthless Technomancer is pretty busted with Korvold. So no Praetor's Grasp to have that sort of backdoor, but we do have more win cons, so maybe we don't, need it as much. Force of Vigor does stand out. It is 4 mana off your Nas, but also it's like it can be a little more reactive. It can be nice to use on like 2 draw engines potentially. If that's your concern, is like, how do I beat Rhystic Mystic? This is basically taking the approach of like run more ways to deal with it versus the approach of like try to get underneath it and get them while they're, tapped out for their value engines. Sawn Half is showing up here. So we are in the Cloudstone Cure as well. So lots of pretty dedicated win con slots. And we're on the One Ring. Really interesting combination of cards here. Like Carpet shows up sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. Food Chain, Blood Moon, not a card you expect to see that much in Korvold. So what does this change about our deck? One, it makes our fetches not work, which is a little whack with Korvold because those are hot. We are a red heavy, at least traditionally Korvold is pretty red heavy. Here, not as much, right? Turn 1 Blood Moon, trying to get out your dorks isn't that likely. So maybe you're doing like a couple dorks into Blood Moon. The Blood Moon is usually at its like most potent early on when people can't like, try to fetch around it if they're running basics or haven't developed their rocks or whatever. It is a little bit of a stacks piece. Maybe it worked out well here. I've never tried Blood Moon in Korvold. You can kind of notice like some of these pieces are overlapping to make our ad nauseum look really wonky, right? Like if I had Nas and hit like Cloudstone, Food Chain, Blood Moon, like I have all these different pieces that don't really do anything. They're actually pretty intensive on my mana values, on top of the things like Force of Vigor, which can be nice out of a Nas, but when you hit it, doesn't feel that great. But I'm curious to hear how the Blood Moon played out. And looking at our land count, we're at 29 lands with the Cradle. Makes a little bit more sense here. Cavern of Souls, usually naming Goblin, I'm guessing. And a decent amount of basics. I guess you're on Blood Moon, right? You kind of have to. So interesting take on Korvold. I would like to see Technomancer. You don't necessarily have to cut one of these win cons. I'm not the biggest fan. We've talked about a lot of these, like of Wither Chain and stuff. You don't really need the dedicated win cons. We talked about that a lot in the last podcast, specifically about Korvold. So if you're interested in that, check that out. But more of a mid-rangey approach to Korvold, and I like the commitment to at least one plan. All right, we got another Sisay. What the heck? What's different? We have a Tezzeret and a Vivien, which are not the most popular cards here, but I'm assuming we're like maybe a pod variant of Sisay because that's kind of Vivien's thing, is being a pod. Vivien also lines up with like the Felidar Guardian pod stuff, which Saheeli Rai also combos with Felidar Guardian. Tezzeret can find a birthing pod for one, but also can just find powerful cards in the deck like Agatha Soul Cauldron, the One Ring, Relic of Legends. So there's some overlap here. It doesn't seem wild and outrageous to see these in here, but we'll see what they're lining up with. Lower on the traditional dorks than the previous list. We do have Corridor Monitor here, and Seaver Exarch. So we're probably doing, Kiki, Felidar. Okay, there's all the stuff. Sometimes all the info is actually more laid out than it maybe looks. So we have a full pod package of Kiki, twin, pod kind of stuff. Sisay does have some overlap with that. You can get the Kiki, you can get the Vivien, you can get your pieces of it, you can get the Tezzeret to go get the pod itself. But we have some other stuff that's standing out too. So we have Tiny Bones Pickpocket, which we saw from Thunder Junction, which is a 1 mana legend that's black, Death Touch, 1/1. When it deals combat damage to a player, you can cast a non-land permanent from that player's graveyard, any mana of any type. It's been kind of compared to Ragavan. It's a little bit Ragavan at home. It probably gets in a little bit more often because people don't really want to block a Death Toucher, but it's also not making you that treasure. It can be nice for Sisay just to have a 1-drop legend in a new color that it didn't really have access to that was actually playable. Biophagus, kind of a nice dork that can help you get ahead on your Sisay. Like if you go like turn 1, land Mox, Biophagus, cast Sisay, comes out at 3 already, which is pretty nice. Corridor Monitor enters, it untaps, something. That's just good in this deck in general. Plus, it works with Kiki Jiki to go infinite. Kalane is interesting. So it's Rakdos Legend for 2, which is kind of nice. When it enters, you make a treasure, and other creatures you control enter with a +1/+1 counter on them for each treasure. So we have to see a little bit of overlap here of like 2 drops that kind of want to come down before Sisay, and then help Sisay come down a little bit bigger ahead of schedule, especially with Kalane. Sisay is going to get +2 just from Kalane being there, plus the counter. So that's a pretty big boost. Honest Rutscene also showing up here. Olivia is a card we've seen show up kind of similar reasons to some of these other Sisay buffers, as well as being able to like have your Bloom Tender come in with haste, stuff like that. And then we got the full pod combo. These are kind of the 4 sorceries like I mentioned before. Instants. In terms of interaction, we got the Fierce, Swat, Force, Step, Swansong. Pretty light on the ability to counter spells. This is kind of more what I was talking about in the last one, where they don't run as many ways to interact on the stack. Run stuff like Legolas's Quick Reflexes to protect their stuff. Dismember here, cheap way to kill a thing. Abrupt Decay, uncounterable way to get rid of an Oppo. You guys know the spiel. Archer Charm showing up here. Wonder how easy this is to cast in this deck without, like docksiding into it. But being able to get Cradle or search for any creature, pretty nice. The rocks, there's our pod. We also have the Aether Vial, which I've been seeing a little bit more of lately. I really like it. Aron the Cultist of the Absolute shows up, as well as the Blind Obedience. And a pretty standard mana base. Welcome to TopDeck.gg, your community's home for everything competitive Magic has to offer. Whether you're hosting an event, playing for a huge prize, or trying to advertise your store to thousands of players, we've got you covered. Using intuitive pairing software, playing Magic is a breeze. All your players have to do is sign up online, then scan the QR code in store. Give your competitors the gift of perfect information as their bracket updates in real time. Then, when the match is decided, our self-reporting software saves you time and leaves paper match slips in the past. Leave the heavy lifting to us so your community can sit back, relax, and have a great day of playing Magic. Next up, we are looking at Rog-pocalypse. Usually a deck that's pretty proven. This more than most, I'm usually just going to say like, all right, these 3 cards stand out. And I usually will use the compare feature. Nobody's complained yet, so let's do that. Compared to the pretty standard Rog-pocalypse deck that you see most events, this one's 5 cards difference, testing a lot of slots. So the typical deck would be on Talisman, Mindbreak Trap, Flail, Steam Vent, Swansong. Swansong's a flex slot, and here this is like one of the swaps we see made, like Swansong for Get Probe, but also on Offer You Can't Refuse over the MBT, Rocket Theater over Steam Vents. Talion is another value engine, and the One Ring. So going a little bit heavier on the engines. Not really going lower on the interaction, but going like a card lower on interaction, but Get Probe is kind of like that, where you check to see if the coast is clear, crack your top deck tutor, stuff like that. And then going on a second Surveil land, which I haven't tested. I know some people have. I'm not really sure about how good it is, but showing up here. In general, I think this might be like a clunkier bit of it. There are more hits here, and I do really love Conqueror's Flail, even though it is like mostly worse than Defense Grid, but it's really coming clutch for me. All right, next up, we're looking at Krark Sakashima. This is a deck that's been on a bit of an uptick already, and I think is probably getting some new tools from Modern Horizons 3. But looking at the creature package, it's kind of what we started to see show up for the last little bit for this deck, where they're running things like Displacer Kitten, new cards like Roaming Throne, which on Wizard or Goblin is both cracked in different ways. They are on Dualcaster, presumably Twin Flame as well, or Molten Duplication. Most of these other cards, they've either been on, on or off, or pretty sold on at this point. Sorceries, Molten Duplication, Twin Flame, and Heat Shimmer, all as options to combo with Dualcaster Mage, as well as just powerful cards in this. If you get Sakashima down, you can just use these to make like a million Krarks, copy your dockside, anything like that. Cantripy, like good Krark cards that we expect, like Rite of Flame can make a million mana, same with Strike It Rich. The tutors we have access to, like Step Through and Merchant Scroll. Get Probe, kind of our Nas at home. And then a million D5 instants. Cantripy stuff, cheap effects that if we copy it, it's pretty good, like Peak, Bolts, and we are on the Brain Freeze, so maybe we're on Breach. I've seen some that are on like just Brain Freeze. I've seen some that are on just Breach. I've seen some that are on Breach, Brain Freeze, no LED. Any combination of those, whether or not you want to do the LED or want to run it is kind of up in the air. How much of the combo you want. I'd say in this deck, once you get going, Breach, Brain Freeze alone should probably get you there. Tons of free spells, because this deck really breaks the free spells. Artifacts, and that is what we see here. No Lion's Eye Diamond, but we do have the Brain Freeze, and I'm guessing we have the Underworld Breach, and we do have the Underworld Breach as well. Both can be pretty powerful on their own. Storm is really good in this deck. You cast a bunch of spells, you brain freeze with one of your Magecraft creatures in play, you're going to win the game. We're on the ring. We're on Imposter Mech, which we can copy a Dockside with, or copy, if we're lucky, we already have a Krark and a Sakashima out, and we can Imposter Mech someone else's Krark to have a Krark that can't be hit by a Bowmaster. Let's go. Or a Bowmaster that can't be hit by a Bowmaster. And of course, we got the Krark Stone. You got to run it, right? Just a flavor fail if you don't. Remora, Breach, Ristic Study, 3 best enchantments in the game. 26 land, mana base. Looks like it's also a Tandy Pact mana base, just in case. Is running the blue-red Surveillant. Next, we're looking at Najeela. It's one with Sidisi's Faithful. Okay. I think the Europeans just like this card a little bit more. The creature package, just the one Dork and Deathrite Shaman. Not even going Birds of Paradise. Say, no. Dies to Bowmasters. Deathrite Shaman only. Makes sense. I don't know if there's quite enough legends here to justify Delighted Halfling. You're pretty much always going to lean on a fetch land. And then Sylvan Safekeeper and Sidisi's Faithful really being the only ones that stand out. Op Agent doesn't always show up in the most turbo decks. Simut pretty much always here. Derevi, Grim Hireling, of course, always here. Sidisi's Faithful being able to do the things that Sidisi's Faithful does. Does have a little bit more flexibility here as just a creature that bounces a thing. So like if someone feels safe in that they have a blocker and they have a Fierce Guardianship or something, Sidisi's Faithful might mess with that. Creature Tutors, Meme Bet, Savine's Wreck. Instance, we do have the Summoner's Pack, which I've been liking in Najeela. Bunch of tutors and interaction and 5 colors. We do have the Snapback showing up. These are kind of just like things you see more in European decks. Snapback, Sidisi's Faithful, cards like that. Dragon's Rage Channeler at times. Limdul's Vault even. Looks like a 5-color Breach deck. To me, an Offer You Can't Refuse showing up again just seems a little bit more popular. Artifacts, they are on the One Ring, and they were on the Nas as well. Mopal is actually maybe a little greedy in this deck. Only 11 artifacts. I don't know. Obviously, the LEDs there. Jeweled Lotus that every Najeela starts with. I don't know how any of them can lose. They always have Jeweled Lotus in their opening. And then enchantments. We're on the Sylvan Library and the Necropotence. Not cards that you always see, especially Sylvan Library at this point. And then usually that in the same deck as Necro, or even in the same deck as Nas. Not necessarily competing for slots. But the Necro, triple black again. We talked about that with Beseech the Mirror. 5-color deck. Doesn't always do it that well, but the Sylvan Library just very rarely shows up at this point, especially in a 5-color, super high card quality pile like this. And then we've got the 27 lands. Don't expect to see a Surveil land in a 5-color deck. Then we're looking at Trimnick's Tymna Kraum. Trimnick, a player who's had a ton of success casting spells like Sidisi's Faithful, Dragon's Rage Channeler, and Snapback. We'll see how many of those are here. Oh, we're not let down yet. This is another one that I think I've seen in previous Trimnick lists. Don't quote me on that. The Teferi without the Kitten, because I do think the Kitten is a little bit bait. I think you can run Teferi, and Teferi has strengths that don't have anything to do with Kitten. Not necessarily a standard, but standard for Trimnick, where like DRC and Sidisi's Faithful are always there. And then Flesh Duplicate and Fairy Mastermind, a little bit more flex slots. Also on the Fimage, no Metamorph. So kind of like Duplicate coming in for Metamorph. Fairy Master coming in is just like, because usually they're on like 13-ish creatures. So Fairy Mastermind just slotting in, and like Delny / DRC, whatever, over something like Dranith. So yeah, Delny coming in, works with Tymna, DRC as Presentable, Sidisi's Faithful, like pretty much every single creature in the deck. Like we like to say, if there's a Burgie, there's a J-Will not too far behind. We also have Deluge showing up. It's like the first board wipe I've seen today. I guess other than Fire Covenant. Wheel and Windfall with the Meme Bet. I like it. If you're going to believe in something, believe in wheels. Alchemist Retrieval. They just love doubling Docksides over there. They love it. Snapback, free way to get rid of that. You have lots of ways here to get rid of problematic permanents that might be dealing with you, messing with you, and or, ways to double up some of your stuff. And then just T&K interaction, sweet, kind of the staples here. Artifacts, the One Ring is showing up. We're on the Nas still, most Tymna Kraums are. Enchantments, we do have the Smothering Tithe and the Necro. This has been my enchantment slots in T&K. Still not sure if my deck is optimized for Necro. I haven't been playing it that much lately, but Smothering Tithe has been unbelievable every game I've played it in. Down to just the 26 lands. Nothing standing out too much about the mana base. We're on the Tarnished Citadel and the Spire of Industry, so Tarnished Citadel, not my favorite, but 5 co-lands, 5 co-land. This next one is one I've talked about a little bit, and I don't think, not my water over, don't think I've ever got to actually cover, and that is Krark Thras. This is a deck that utilizes Krark's ability to do what Krark does. It lets you kind of storm, and Thrasios' ability to sometimes be a value engine, but also just to be an outlet for infinite mana, which is like the biggest strength of it. It's just a colorless outlet for mana. Let's see, we got a pretty heavy creature base, and you can kind of see those two things working together. So you see Krark cards that stand out, like Goblin Anarchomancer, Harmonic Prodigy, Burgie, Frenetic of Freed. Okay, well, didn't know that one was showing up here nowadays. Veyron, Displacer Kitten, which is a Thrasios card too, but lines up between those two strategies. Roaming Throne, Stormcloud Nurse, and new edition Subtly, which has been showing up in the like 2-3-ish color Is It Plus decks. Just a value engine-y thing that can also probably not go infinite in this deck. You're probably not going to run cards to go infinite with it. Maybe. Subtly is just a pretty good card. You just casting a lot of spells in a turn, tap, copy that thing, get it going, you know. We're Krarking anyways, you might as well. And then you can also see the Thrasios part of the deck, right? We've got the birds, we got the dorks, the Kinnins. I'm a little iffy on Dualcaster Mage. I guess you want maybe some number of Twin Flames or Molten Duplications in a deck like this anyways, so it's maybe not too bad. Dualcaster Mage, I feel like in Temur is just like, we have so many ways to win. I'm a little iffier on it, but again, I haven't played this specific deck. So we have that kind of like toolboxy, teamer-ish package of like, a little surprised to see Trinket Mage and no Trophy Mage, but maybe there's a one or less that we really like. I'm not really sure. But Trophy Mage usually being able to get like Basalt for Cannon, potentially Cloudstone for Dockside, and Rog Thrash, like Relic of Legend, stuff like that. So yeah, you see that overlap, and then like Seedborn Muse makes me think we're maybe leaning a little bit more into that mid-rangey option. Krark being able to like kind of break those mid-range things, and then Thrasios being able to traditionally develop you is a kind of awesome combination. Sorceries, Get Probe, of course. Grape Shot. We're on Land Grant. Okay, I wonder how many lands we're on. J-Will, awesome here. I like the 2 cheap commanders. That just enables a lot of things. If you haven't played a deck with lots of cheap commanders, it's so good. So again, kind of a combination of Krark and Thrasios cards just thrown together. Okay, some interesting stuff here too. So Essence Flux is a flicker effect in blue, which is pretty nice and been on the like considering list for me and some other like Rog Thrash pilots. Emerald Charm's cool. Untap target permanent, destroy target global enchantment, which is just enchantment now. A target creature loses flying. It's usually for untap target permanent. For a Cradle deck, that can be good there. We can maybe do some Stellar Elite things with that, which would be cool. Because I think we can, so Stormcloud Artist in play, Stellar Elite's active, we cast the Emerald Charm, targeting Stellar Elite, tap Stellar Elite to copy out Emerald Charm, get Infinite Treasures, win with Thrasios, press the Thrasios button. And then also, I'm guessing overlaps with like a Cradle kind of strategy anyways. So we're on Breach, which I kind of expected, you know, which we got the Brain Freeze. Flame of Honor is cool. And then the free spells to take advantage of Krark. I know I would like this deck. I should build it at some point. Rog Thrash is just eating up my cEDH experience right now between Rog Thrash and Rog-Sai. Narset's Reversal doesn't always show up. Artifacts, pretty well what you'd expect. Springleaf Drum, Mamber were great with both of those. Mana, the One Ring. Enchantments, Remora, Breach, Study, keeping it simple. Lands, we are in the Cradle, makes sense. We're also on Alchemist Refuge, which is like a kind of more expensive Emergent Zone type of thing. Are we on Crop Rotation? Crop Rotation is interesting because if it works well with Krark, it's amazing. You just 1 mana. Usually Crop Rotation is kind of like as a ritual anyways. Go get Cradle and make a bunch of mana. Being able to like get Cradle, get Deserted Temple, untap Cradle, so make a bunch of mana is nice. If that Krark flip ever returns that Crop Rotation to your hand though, that's gotta hurt so bad. I don't really see the Trinket Mage, Urza Saga Vision. I mean, there's good stuff here, but I'm not going to run slots for it, so I don't really know. I mean, they're flexible. I'm not really sure on that. Like in Rog Thrash, we run it for Expedition Map and then, you know, some other stuff too, but really see it in this deck, so I'm not really sure. But good 3-colored Temur mana base. This deck looks awesome. This deck looks like so much fun. If you want to like Storm and mid-range and get to do like a whole lot of the different experiences of cEDH, I think it's a great deck for it. And we got another Tymna Kraum. Let's see what stands out. Nothing. Almost the exact same creature base as the last one we looked at. No Sidisi's Faithful. Also on Wheel Windfall. So very similar decks so far. Deluge here too. Again on the J-Will. Super similar deck to the Terminix list that we just looked at. Snapback. There, I mean, so far, just like 2 cards different from what I can tell. There's the Ring, there's the Nas. Another difference here in Copy Artifact over Necropotence, it looks like. Not a card I've messed around with. Not a lot of amazing targets. I mean, people like it with the One Ring, but it hasn't seemed like really broken. And then 27 lands, slightly different mana base with like no Tarnished Citadel. Next up at 6th place, we have a Tivit with Tezzeret the Seeker. I just love Tezzeret. It's just so good. Like, maybe I'm just Rog Thrash build. In that deck, it just gets everything you want. In this deck, I know it at least gets probably the One Ring and, of course, your Time Sieve. Maybe also Defense Grid if you're really based. So, looking like the more reactive kind of Tivit thing, we're on Drannith, Containment Priest, Archivist of Ogma, Dothy. In terms of like proactively good, I mean, even Notion Thief, I guess, is reactive if you're not like running a lot of wheels. Usually Tivit's on Twister. We'll see. Urza, of course, I love. Sorceries, yeah, at least 2 board wipes. Are on the Windfall over Twister, so maybe slightly more likely to be on like the Intuition line or, you know, something like that. They are in Sevrek too, so that makes sense. Or also, I also like to point out, you know, if people are actually buying their decks, this deck would cost literally double if you added Time Twister to it because that card is outrageous. Instance, got the Consult, Rituals, Dispel, lots of interaction. Stern Scolding, you should expect to see this a lot less because Strix's Serenade, the new Swan Song variant, is probably going to completely replace this card. Maybe decks like this that are super reactive might play both, but I expect to see that card throw Stern Scolding out of the metagame entirely. Delay, Mana Drain, Dovin's Veto. This person does not want anyone else to cast any spells. More artifacts. So we got a nice, okay, so pretty good selection of things to get with Tezzeret, right? Sometimes it's going to be Cage. Sometimes it's going to be Civ, Witchclaw Talisman. Lots of different stuff to get. Most of them being mana, but just having that Cage, Witchclaw, Time Civ, Curse Totem, just those four, or big piece of mana, that's a pretty good amount of flexibility that card's offering you. Enchantments, pretty well what we'd expect. Touch, Tithe. I don't think I've seen a single Tivit with Necro. And 29 lands are on the Cavern of Souls. On the Triome, we see very few Triomes here in cEDH, but it kind of lines up pretty well if you're in a deck like, for the same reason I would probably run a Surveil land for that reason. So I don't think mana is that hard with Tivit. You do have things like Dothi Voidwalker and Grand Abolisher and Thor. You know, we have like some double pip cards, but Surveil lands are really nice. And then at 5th place, speaking of a reactive deck, we've got Talion, the Kindly Lord, with a Karn, the Great Creator, and another person who probably doesn't like anyone having any fun or casting any spells. We got Tidebinders and Drakes and Shredders and Sakashimas and Spellskites. Hullbreaker Horror, again, does not have a deterministic thing with Talion, but a lot of times it's just like pure control. Throw this thing in on an instep, protect it with a free spell, Bowmaster, kill everybody to death, or clone something, blah, blah, blah. We're on the Twister, Deluge, Beseech, kind of just like the best stuff you'd want in this kind of deck. Probably not on Nas when we see Seagate Restoration. Instance, 28 of them. We're just countering all the spells. Spell Snaring and Stern Scolding and Swan Songing and Strix's Serenading. They love these alliterative counter spells, huh? Yeah, very interactive deck that's gonna draw cards and counter spells. Boy, what else can you ask for? And then we are on the kind of like little package like the last deck was of the Grafdigger's Cage, the Cursed Totems, also on the Weathered Runestones here. Didn't want to do that in the last deck because we did have like the Sevrek thing we could do. Are on the Blood Chief's Ascension, no Mind Crank or whatever. So not doing it for the combo, just putting the pressure on people's life totals pretty early. Another Copy Artifact Enjoyer, Counterbalance Enjoyer, no Sisay Stop, just pure counterbalance. Then Dress Down Ristic Study, 28 lands total. And then going into the top 4, it's a Circus of Value. Another Teferi Enjoyer. So a lot of similar things to the other two lists we saw, right? Sidisi's, DRC, Fairy Mastermind, Duplicate Bergie, blah, blah, blah. Delny showing up too. And we even have a Mayhem Devil showing up. Doesn't necessarily do anything with Tymna Kraum, but is a really flexible little option. Facebreaker as a value engine, going even one card deeper on a clone with Metamorph, which is usually what we see here. Usually, you know, in the US events, it's like Fimage, Metamorph. Talion showing up here as well. So pretty heavy on the creatures at 19. Double Wheel. So again, this is where it's really similar to the other lists. Reanimate those showing up here. We do see the Deadly Rollick here. Mayhem Devil. Just want to take over the board, I guess. Some people just want to mess other people up. No Nas in this deck, and that makes sense with 19 creatures. It may not seem like it matters much, but like, I mean, 20% of your deck is creatures, and most creatures are a dead draw to Nas. You know, you don't really want to draw into too many Talions and professional Facebreakers. On the Blind Obedience, Tithe, no Necro here too. 26 lands. We are on the Manamo, which is good with the ring, but seems like a little bit more of a cost in this kind of deck. 3rd place, we've got another Sisay deck, and we have a Dahada Enjoyer this time in both flavors, Giga Drone and Dahada Binder of Wills. Both do kind of different things in the deck. One's an untapper and can do some neat stuff. Dahada, you know, you kind of know what Mardu Dahada does. It's based. Nicole Bolas showing up. Big old combo engine. Delny showing up here. Rutstein, maybe the staple of the deck now. I looked at this card and just didn't really think about it in the context of Sisay. Kitesail Arsonist showing up here again. Their own op agent. So this is tough because if you're playing against a bunch of Sisays, which a lot of tournaments have now, you do want op agent, but everybody plays clones. And as a Sisay, if you introduce the op agent and then somebody clones it, not a great experience. For the most part, no crazy card selection here that we see. Also, Gilded Drake, not the most common in Sisay. Have your pick of those 4 I mentioned earlier. Instance, kind of in the middle. They're not the lightest on instant speed interaction. You know, a decent amount of counter spells, especially Dovin's Veto, Legolas's Quick Reflexes, Court of Calling. We see a lot of differences in how people approach their Sisay builds with Instance, Relic, Cauldron, One Ring. What else do you expect? And a bunch of mana. Enchantments. So some interesting ones here. the ones we kind of expect. Vraska joins up, black green enchantment. ETB, put a death touch counter on each creature you control. When a legendary creature you control is commented to a player, draw a card. Black green at 2 mana value that we can search up. Nice for Sisay. Gives all our creatures death touch, which is really nice for getting in with creatures, which we now want to do because we now created our own little draw engine with this card, with just smacking people with our legends to draw some cards, which is pretty nice. And then Annie joins up, 4 mana, 1 and Naya. ETB, deal 5 damage to target creature or planeswalker opponent controls. If a triggered ability of a legendary creature you control triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. So how many of those do we have? Ragavan, Kinnan, Lavinia, I guess, Lotho, Derevi, Rutstein, Kutzel, Solvala, Sakashima stays legendary, so that can be doubled as well. Talion, Urtai. So yeah, pretty good amount actually. It is kind of expensive and hard to tutor out, but it does give us 3 colors, which there's not a lot of cards like that in the deck that end up making it. So could be an interesting option, and just ETBs kill something, which is pretty nice. Then at second place, we have Underworld Najeela. 18 creatures. We have a few of the dorks, birds, and the 2 hierarchs. It's about what I like. And then kind of the staples, no Ranger Captain, pretty notable. Sorceries, only thing really standing out here. We are on a wheel, but other than that is the fact that we're on Beseech the Mirror. Again, 5 color decks. Don't have the easiest time casting this. We'll see. This could be like a Necro Cabalrit variant. We'll see. Instance, lots of cheap interaction. We're on the March, Red Blast. We're on the Veil, no quick reflexes. Born, Snapback showing up here. We're still on the Nas. Final Fortune. Nothing else standing out too much. Offer You Can't Refuse, just really popular like every other country's metagame. But here, we're on the One Ring as well. So Nas and One Ring and Beseech. Yeah, we are on the Necropotence. There's no Cabalrit, right? They just don't believe in the Cabalrit. It doesn't matter how many triple black spells they have in their 5 color deck. They're not casting it. Pretty much, it's like Dockside or Bust for these mana bases to function, I feel like. And then we're on the Tithe, I guess, to help making it work too. Then the lands, 27. We're a Cradle deck too. When are they going to make a Cradle that taps for black? And last up, we're taking a look at another rock site, and we're going to do it in the traditional way. You can already see one difference with this image, but choose that compare feature like we love to do with Rogside. It's just tradition at this point, right? Probably something you're going to see me do much less frequently when Modern Horizons 3 comes out and we have like lots of new cards to consider. So in the traditional list, MBT, Warrior's Oath, Infernal Plunge, Snap, Grinding Station, Undercity Sewers, Paradise Mantle. Decent amount of changes with 7. Offer coming in over MBT, a change we saw in the other Rockside list. Get Probe coming in, Mount Doom over Sewers. So that's kind of just the old, like not doing the newer swap. Image coming in just as a new creature over whatever, going down I would probably look at it as like Warrior's Oath going down for One Ring. I mean, that's the swap that I had made previously. One Ring as a draw engine over the ability of like Warrior's Oath to like kind of be an advantage engine in terms of like I get an extra turn over you guys, but however you want to look at that. And then less on like mana generating stuff like Snap, Paradise Mantle, Infernal Plunge, and doing more Dockside doublers / reactive pieces potentially with Alchemist Retrieval and Snapback. And then not doing Grinding Station. Some people like it, some people don't. It being such a flexible option with Breach is really nice, and I've liked it, but lots of different approaches to these decks. And this one won, like I said, 104 player tournament won with this Rog Silas deck with 7 cards different from the standard list. Doesn't seem like a lot, but this being kind of the most established, the most samey deck in the format does kind of mean something, I think. So really cool to see. So let me know down below which of these decks was your favorite. I love taking a look at tournaments from different countries and different continents even. Taking a look at their meta, you can see different cards were more favored here versus what we see traditionally played over in the US. Let me know which tournament I should cover next if there's a big one that you're looking forward to or one you're attending. Let me know down below. As I mentioned, you can get your tournament covered over on Patreon. Any event you want covered, that's a new tier. Let me know what you think about that tier. If it's something you're interested in, don't like the price, don't like how it works, any of it. Kind of experimenting and testing with all this stuff. But with all that being said, thank you so much for watching, and as always, go play cEDH. Have a good one, everybody.